Live now. So I guess welcome to everyone who is able to join us from the start. I will just ramble a little bit as usual whilst we're waiting for people to join. If you can, as soon as you can see or hear me, give us a thumbs up or type a comment in the box. That would be extremely useful, so I know that I'm not just talking to myself. But we're delighted to be here today with Joshua Tharby. I guess I'll leave him to introduce himself in a moment, but we were looking for a specialist property accountant to come in and run through some of the details of the sort of business continuity schemes that the government have announced, some of the packages there to help us survive the coming weeks and months. And given some of the content that Joshua has been sharing over, I suppose it's probably been, 6 months or so since I've been aware of you. My YouTube just started going crazy in the background, so that means we're officially live now. Just seeing some of the content that you've been sharing over the past couple of months, I just thought there was no better person to get on board to sort of break it down in a simplistic fashion and hopefully give us a bit of reassurance, and that's what we want to do. Purely from a logistics point of view, if you've got any questions, stick them in the chat box. We'll try to run through this in a semi-structured order, but it'd be great to hear from you as well in terms of what specifically you would be interested in us focusing on, even if you don't have a particular question about it. If you are a director, if you think you're self-employed, if you're worried about the sort of job retention scheme, again, let us know in the comments just so we can get a bit of a feel for who's joining us today and we can maybe focus a bit more attention on that. But yeah, Joshua, thank you for being here. I'm delighted that you could join us. It'd be great if you could just give us a bit of an introduction to who you are, what your business does, and why you're here today.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So I'm Joshua Tharby, Managing Director of JSM Partners. We're a firm of property specialist tax accountants based just in Peterborough, and we work with landlords, property developers, basically anyone that's got any involvement in property to provide them kind of proactive tax advice and ensure that they're running the business in the best way possible. The reason I'm here today really is just to help put people's mind at ease on some of the support that is available from the government. And really just to kind of answer any questions people might have about how it applies to them, what they're eligible for, and that's it.
Perfect. So, I mean, I don't want to get into a political debate by any stretch, but generally speaking, in terms of the sort of the package that has been announced, do you think that it's going to help? Is it got the right intentions? Does it go far enough? What's your general view on whether we can survive the months ahead?
Yeah, definitely. I think no questions about it. It's going to help. Whether it's going to help everybody, it doesn't look like it will. There's some key areas that have been missed. So in terms of the stimulus that's happened, it kind of all of these businesses have been forced to close down. If these schemes weren't available, there'd be hundreds of thousands, millions of people that would be made redundant. Kind of all of McDonald's staff, Cafe Nero, obviously all of these big businesses that have tens of thousands of people on the payroll. If it weren't for these schemes that have been put in place, all of these people would be completely unemployed, earning no money. Whereas now, because of all of these help measures that have been introduced by the government, all of these people are still earning money and they're still spending in the economy. That said, there are some areas that have been missed. So kind of people that own their own limited company, because of the way some of the schemes work, they've been quite massively left out in terms of dividend income as well. So if you take dividends from your company, the way the schemes work, that essentially people with dividend income aren't helped by this at all. Mm-hmm. It's mainly just some of the smaller self-employed people and employees that it's mainly helped, not business owners. So there has been a lot of debate around that, quite a few petitions going around to try and effectively get the government to change their mind and look to help the businesses.
Yeah, I've seen some of them, and who knows how much impact they will have, but it is definitely one of the sort of big areas of concern, and we can touch on that today. So from I guess as a sort of property specialist, you will have had conversations with lots of people over the past couple of weeks. What seems to be the biggest concern from a sort of landlord or investor point of view with regards to sort of business continuity, income support over the coming weeks, and some of these schemes that have been announced?
Yeah, well, quite a few people. We've had many conversations. Essentially, people asking what support's available to them, what can they do essentially to make sure that they withstand this crisis. And our most common answer to that is literally just watch your cash position. So the mortgage holidays are one thing that's available from a lot of lenders now, but you shouldn't necessarily take a mortgage holiday unless you need it, because simply they are accruing interest on that. So most people tend to rush into getting a mortgage holiday, but that should really be something that you shouldn't just rush into. In terms of what help's available for landlords, because it's not really they're not employees, they're not self-employed, it's fundamentally almost an investment activity still in terms of tax. So there's really not much that's available, and it has been made available by the government for landlords. I think the reason for this is because landlords have tenants, and if their tenants are still getting paid through being self-employed, being employed, and they're still receiving their money, I think the theory behind it all is that they should still keep paying their rent. So throughout this whole crisis, as long as all of the tenants are still getting money, that should automatically trickle down to the landlords, who should, as a whole, be relatively unaffected by this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was one of the sort of biggest observations that I made early on when they started announcing the early parts of these schemes. There was a bit of uncertainty, but then it became very clear that they were trying to focus on the top of the funnel rather than create different solutions for every different business. It was a case of, well, if we can keep as many people as possible earning most, if not all, of their income, then the filter through result of that is that we need to have less packages available for people further down the chain, because the people who are generating an income and feeding into the system, whether it's landlords or retail or whatever, as long as we can keep the income flowing, then everything else should sort of trickle down. And it seems to, logically, it kind of makes sense. Whether it does in practice or not, whether the cash is there in time or not, that's what we kind of need to, I guess, wait and see. But the overall premise kind of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that one.
Okay, so I guess you said something interesting there, which maybe a lot of people haven't considered or aren't aware of. When it comes to some of the support and the schemes that have been announced, did you say from a landlord's point of view, we're kind of not in that self-employed bucket?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll jump straight onto one of the schemes that are available. Is available. It's the Coronavirus Self-Employment Support Scheme. This was announced just last week. So for people that are self-employed, and this is per the tax return you fill out. So on your self-assessment tax return, there's a specific page for self-employment. It's called the SA 103. So it's only the people that fill that out. So for property, there's a property section. So it doesn't cross over. You have to fill out the self-employment section to qualify for this. If you've got self-employment income of under £50,000, and you must have filled out a tax return for the 18-19 tax year, you are eligible to get 80% of your average profits, up to £2,500 from the government, which is due to be paid in June.
Okay, so that feels like it will be a big help. Although, again, sort of further down the line, we're going to need to think about surviving for the next couple of years. But our rental income as such isn't really going to contribute towards that. So, for someone who is, if their primary income is from property, it's not really going to go a huge way to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. So if your primary income is from property, that has no bearing on you whatsoever. It wouldn't apply, and it's really little help. It's aimed at smaller self-employed people, because you've got that £50,000 cap on it as well. Mm-hmm. And you have to have been self-employed and filing a tax return for the 18-19 tax year. So again, people who have recently gone self-employed within the past year, they've been left out of this. And indeed, people who might have been self-employed then but stopped, they've also been left out of this. There are a lot of gaps in this plan, essentially, that are people who have just been completely forgotten about and bypassed. There is one scheme that might be eligible for a lot of directors, where they own their property through a limited company. Mm-hmm. So it's the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme. And the way this works is it's similar to the self-employment support scheme, whereby if you were to furlough an employee, furlough, that means to not work for a temporary amount of time. So I think of all of these Starbucks, McDonald's, Cafe Nero workers who, because their establishment's closed, their staff physically can't work there. So if it weren't for this legislation, they'd all be made redundant. This crosses over into property businesses in that where you get paid, so you're on the payroll, as at the 28th of February, and if you were to be furloughed simply because, say, for instance, your business doesn't need you anymore, you've been massively impacted, and there's no work for you to do in your business, then you can claim this and potentially claim 80% of your salary.
Okay, yep.
But the key is there, you have to have been impacted by the coronavirus. So it's quite difficult for, say, if you're a portfolio landlord, it's quite difficult for you to prove that you've been impacted by this. But if you're in a serviced accommodation sector and essentially people aren't booking your apartments anymore, then it's quite easy to demonstrate the fact that people aren't booking your apartments anymore. So you can furlough yourself essentially. And then if you were to be putting through a payroll each month, say £1,000, you could claim 80% of this back from the government. And the only condition really is that you can't do any work for your business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say that. So that is one of the conditions, right? You can't take this the 80% through the job retention scheme and continue to operate. Same way that you couldn't take that 80% and still have your employees working for you. In effect, you kind of need to stop working on your business, which maybe puts people in a difficult situation if there's some ongoing work that needs to be done. I mean, how closely do you think the government are really going to monitor this? Are you still able to respond to emails and, keep on top of a few bits and pieces whilst you're going through this?
Well, it's going to be really interesting to see how they do monitor this, really, because the number of people this is going to apply to is probably in the millions. So depending on how kind of hot they are on it, we have no idea. It has never been done in history before. There's no kind of legislation around this yet. So it's completely unprecedented. But how closely they monitor it, we don't know. There is a bit of a get-out clause because as a director, you've got statutory duties. And one of those is to promote the success of the company. Mm-hmm. So the scope of this potentially leads into this being a good argument. You could put forward to HMRC to continue marketing in your business. So if you are, we'll touch back to a service accommodation operator. So if you are trying to get business, so you are doing marketing activities, you are replying to emails, this could be considered promoting the success of the company, in which case this activity would be considered a statutory duty rather than actually working in the business.
Okay.
But we have no idea how far the crossover really is. So we'd suggest maybe replying to a couple of emails, that could be okay. But when you start to check guests in and out and actually start delivering in the operations side of the business, that's likely when you'll be on that and you wouldn't be eligible.
Okay, so a sort of quite a narrow line to walk down then. I guess the other downside for this for a lot of sort of sole director property investors with their portfolio in a limited company is from a tax point of view, they might have spent the past couple of years minimizing their PAYE and taking it as dividends. You mentioned that before. So in effect, if they've been paying 8-10 grand a year, if they've been paying themselves 8 or 10 grand a year as a salary, it's going to be a fairly insignificant sum of money, that 80% that they're getting back.
So assuming it's the most tax-efficient salary for this tax year just closing is £719. So 80% of this, I think it was £575 or £525, one of those two numbers. So less than £600 that you'll get for this, which is really why it's probably not going to be worth claiming for the vast majority of people. The fact is there's still opportunity out there. Businesses are slowing down, but to take a month off and step back from your business just to receive £600 is it's going to be quite an expensive price to pay in the long run, I think, because if you were working in your business full-time for a month, the chances are you would make more than £600 in terms of future revenue if you were doing your marketing efforts, if you were working on your systems. So for this reason, it's really worth considering if you should be taking advantage of this scheme or not, because it's a very fine line to walk down. Yeah,
I get that. It's it's not the most promising news, and I want to get to some more sort of optimistic options here rather than just saying, well, this doesn't make sense for us, that doesn't make sense for different people. But it's good to understand, one by one, where it can help and where it can't help. So you've looked at the job retention scheme, the self-employment income support scheme as well. What about the business interruption loans? Are they something that we could look at? Obviously, that's something that we're going to have to pay back, and we need to consider if taking debt into our business makes sense. But as property investors and landlords, are those business interruption loans something that we can consider?
Yes, so definitely they're worth looking at. So you have to go speak to your bank manager about that, or a finance broker. But they are an attractive scheme that's available, simply because the government covered the first year's worth of interest. So who knows how long this corona crisis will last. Mm-hmm. But looking at other countries, looking at China, it's going to be less than a year. So going out there, getting one of these business interruption loans, where it's effectively interest-free for the first year, is going to put you in a really strong position, simply because if it does last 6 months, and mortgage holidays will be up by then if you've taken advantage of those, so you will need to find some cash from somewhere to service the property, pay your agents, pay the mortgage. And if you can't get that from anywhere else, then a business interruption loan is going to be a cheaper way of getting it compared to a normal personal loan or any other form of finance.
Yeah, and I looked into this in a little bit of detail, and I think from memory, if it's less than 25 grand, it would just be dealt with as a sort of normal loan from your bank. These business interruption loans specifically are for loans in excess of £25,000, and there's some sort of criteria that you need to meet to justify that sum of money. I think one of them was up to double your annual PAYE bill, and there were a few other sort of ways that you can estimate how much you can borrow here. You said it's interest free for the first 6 months, for the first 12 months. I think the first 6 months they defer any capital repayments as well, so you're not paying anything back until 6 months from getting the loan. So if you are in a bind and this money is something that can get you through short-term difficulties with a view to growing your business and being able to pay this back in the long term, then it is something that is probably a relatively cost affordable way of raising some cash in the short term.
Yeah, completely agree with that one.
Okay. Looking specifically at serviced accommodation, there are business rates holidays available, and there are some grants available as well. Now, the reason I'm saying specific to service accommodation, they could also apply to anyone else who's running a sort of service that's related to property investment, whether you've maybe got a small letting agency business and you pay business rates through that, or it may apply to other people. But as an investment strategy, I guess the most people it's going to apply to are SA operators. And there are two things here, right? There's the business rates holiday, which is one individual scheme, and then there's the grant funding available as well for people who are paying sort of small business rates.
Yeah, so for anyone who was paying small business rates, claiming small business rates relief, as at the 11th of March, you're eligible for a cash grant of £10,000, which has been made available to your local council. Quite a few of them have started rolling out the application process. For some councils, you don't actually need to apply, but are definitely worth speaking to your local council to see whether you need to apply for it, giving your bank details to get the grant through, or if they've already got your bank details. They are expected to start being paid out early next month, so it's definitely worth looking at if you're paying business rates in any of your units, or if you've got a kind of office or a shop front where you are paying small business rates, then it's definitely worth looking into this, because technically, as it stands at the moment, it looks like there's a chance that for each property you've got where you've got on small business rates, you might be able to get a grant for each of those. We're not quite sure how that will work in practice and whether that's going to actually be how it turns out, but the opportunity is there, and it's definitely worth asking, because if not, you won't get.
Okay, it's good to know, and it's maybe a bit of a silver lining for SA operators. I was wondering about this as well. I don't know if you've looked into this at all, Joshua, but from a selfish point of view, we have got several commercial to residential conversions on the go at the moment, which are currently rated for business rates. Some of them are in the same company, some of them are in individual SPVs. So given that they are currently on business rates, even though we're converting them into residential property, there is no real business operation going on there at the moment. I mean, are those buildings, is that something, if they're going to qualify for these grants as well, or at least the sort of...
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the use. So you claim the small business rates on them at the moment?
So in some cases we are, yeah. So there's a couple of instances where we own one commercial property in an SPV, and as such we have effectively made that our head office for the duration of the build, and we're claiming small business rates relief through it.
Yeah. So on that basis, I can't see any reason why you wouldn't be eligible for it. It's just a case of contacting the council. As you mentioned, if it's in a different SPV, that does increase your chance of getting it. So if you've got multiple properties and multiple SPVs, on the face of it, you should be able to get a £10,000 grant for each of those properties per company. So that may well work out a very prudent decision.
Okay, fine. It's good to know. And from a business rates holiday as well, am I right in thinking that there's going to be a holiday? There is going to be a break in small business rates for, I think, is it the next 12 months?
Yeah, I believe, I've not got it in front of me, I think there's no business rates for the rest of the year, at least. I think it could be up to 12 months, yeah.
Okay, and I guess that's not going to be related specifically to service accommodation providers. That's like, I think they group it retail, hospitality, and leisure.
Yeah, that's correct.
There may be some other instances there where there's scope to get some sort of relief there.
Yeah, especially if the remit of retail, hospitality and leisure, that does fall into quite a wide sector. So there are bound to be plenty of people out there that would better take advantage of that.
Okay. And then this is less a benefit in terms or support in terms of cash in the bank, but from a cash flow impact, they're still going to have the same net result. You've got the VAT deferral scheme and also the self-assessment payment due in July. That's going to get deferred to January as well. So there are a couple of additional support schemes in place there that will reduce what we need to pay out in the coming months, even if it doesn't necessarily mean more money coming into the business.
Yeah, exactly. If you can't get more cash in, then the next best thing to do is stop cash going out. So the VAT deferral, that's for any payments between about 2 weeks ago, I can't remember the exact date, and the 30th of June. So any payments that would usually be taken then. You don't need to pay those. They're completely penalty and interest free. And they don't actually need to be paid until April 2021. But one thing to remind everyone of is if you've got a monthly direct debit set up for your VAT payments, make sure you cancel that because HMRC might still take it by accident. So that's one thing to do, is make sure that your direct debit is cancelled. If not, it could be taken in error. Okay. And then just touched on the payments on account. Yeah, so usually you've got your 31st of July payment on account due. That's going to be deferred all the way until 31st of January next year, and again, completely interest-free. Okay. So, I mean, my normal circumstance is it gets to the 30th of July, and then I start scrabbling around thinking, geez, how am I going to pay this tomorrow? But you, obviously, as an accountant, would be recommending that people are putting away a certain proportion of their income every month to pay for that. So if people are taking their accountant's advice on board and building up for these payments, there could be a little bit of cash flow there that's maybe put aside in a separate account that could be injected back into the business. Yeah, absolutely. At the very, very worst case, this is a really unprecedented time in your business, and there's no way that you could plan for this. You might have a bit of money aside, but if you need to, that tax pot that you've got saved aside, that could be used to cover any voids you've got, any necessary expenses, and you've got all the way until January next year to top that back up again. Okay, perfect. So I think, are they the main schemes have we touched on there? Have we missed anything out in terms of the major ones that could impact landlords and investors? Yeah, I think they're the biggest ones. Is there anything else? I don't think there is in terms of headline ones that are really impacting property businesses as a whole. Mm-hmm. You've got your mortgage breaks, and you've also got your rent breaks off the back of that as well. But they're the key schemes that are available at the moment. Who's to say that more might be published later on, especially if some of these petitions make it to Downing Street. But as it stands today, they're the key ones. Okay, fine. So I'm happy to. We've got plenty of time, so I'm happy to spend a bit of time jumping into specific questions and scenarios. If people want to share them in the discussion for this, I will pick them up. But I guess just from a sort of more general point then, as we went through them, there are a few things that could help us out in a small way, a few things that don't really help us out massively as investors and landlords. It does
to an extent, and you kind of said this yourself as well, feel like we have been forgotten about, overlooked a little bit.
Yeah.
Part of that is going back to what we were saying about top of the funnel. As long as people continue to get paid, we shouldn't be impacted massively. But I mean, what's your sort of general advice, or just words of sort of reassurance to landlords and investors who are thinking they are going to struggle over the next couple of months? What's the best action that they can be taking to protect themselves just now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just to start planning for the worst. Obviously, hope for the best, but make sure that you are doing some kind of cash flow planning. So for all of our clients, we've been speaking to them and helping them prepare their cash flow. So look at all the funds they've got available now. Look at, okay, so if this property doesn't have its rent paid, what else do we have to do? And plan through these scenarios, go for best case, kind of realistic case, and then worst case, and make sure that under each of those, especially the worst case, you're able to withstand that and you're not left with a significant shortfall. Because I would say the best time to find cash is when you don't need it. So it's best to try and get all of your funding together now, so that if in 3 months' time this corona crisis lasts for a lot longer than we expected, and then people start being really impacted, and tenants do stop paying, make sure you've got enough set aside for that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I've had a couple of people ask me how long realistically we think this is going to go on for, how long we do need to plan for from a contingency point of view. Have you got any sort of general views or opinions on that? Like I say, I'm not going to hold you to it, but I mean, when you're telling people to cash flow forecast and to plan, we're looking a couple of months, 6 months, what would you suggest?
I think months, best case, 6 months, kind of on the worst side of being realistic. And then months is very, very worst case. I'd say 3 to 6 months, looking at other countries, looking at what the government are saying. 3 to 6 months of interruption to your business, interruption to your tenants' businesses and employment. That's, I think, realistically what we're looking at, and what I'm planning for is 3 to 6 months. Okay,
good to know. And am I right in thinking that you shared a couple of templates for sort of cash flow planning, cash flow forecasting? They're available if people want a guide to how to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way is to message me on Facebook, LinkedIn, any of the places that I'm on. Message me that, and I've got a YouTube video showing through how to fill it out. It's a basic one, but I did that so that everybody has a fair chance at it, because Excel can be pretty complicated. So we've got a video that matches along that, and we've also got an Excel template that maps you through all of your income, all of your outgoings, and even a nice graph on there to see what your cash is.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So I will. I'll maybe see if I can find a link to your Facebook profile or something that we can share with people in the comments to this afterwards. But that'd be really useful for people. So I've had a few questions. We posted about this on Instagram, and I've had a few questions from that I'm going to run through first and foremost. But just like I say, to those of you who are watching us live, if you do have any questions for Joshua, we will hang around and answer them. It'd also be great. We obviously, there's no charge to these calls, but it would be great if we could get as many people as possible to see them. So if you've got 2 seconds just to give it a thumbs up whilst you're watching on YouTube, that would help us out just to reach as many people as we can. But in terms of first question here, this one's maybe a little bit contentious. I've had a question from Carl on Instagram, who is, I guess the gist of it is, concerned that his business is going to struggle, but thinking longer term about the country, the economy. And I've had this question a few times. Even people have said, about like from a legacy, what they're leaving to their kids and that sort of stuff. The schemes and the money that's available, is it something that you should be looking at as something that you're entitled to almost? There's grants that are available to anyone in certain industries who are paying sort of qualify for small business rates. If everyone takes them, even if they don't necessarily need them, is that going to cripple the economy generally? Should we be thinking about this from a sort of a modesty point of view and thinking, if we can survive, if we can cut back, if we can do other things to make it work? It's almost like a moral question as well, right? Have you got any views on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that the way they're going to pay for all of this is by taxing tomorrow, essentially. So everyone that takes the money when they don't really need it, I suppose, it's a moral question as to whether that's something you're comfortable doing. I suppose if you didn't need to, kind of people that maybe get the 10k grant for all of their different properties, all different SPVs, if they abuse your system like that, it's only going to be made up for by taxing it tomorrow. So whether that's the kind of way they're looking to do it, that's fine. But I'd suggest that if you can go by without doing it, it makes sense to do so, because are we entitled to it? I'd say no. Most of the people that set up in business, they've had the rewards of this for the past 10 or 12 years that the economy's been good. It's been a great time to be in business. Compared to employees and everyone else that's stuck in the office for 40 hours a week, you've had a lot of good fun and got a lot of freedom from that. So as a prudent business owner, it's almost it's one of the rules that you have some cash aside for the times, not necessarily like a world crisis and there's a kind of a virus that goes on and kills everyone. It's essentially when business is slow. So, we recommend to all our clients to have 3 to 6 months operating expenses aside, very, very worst case. So by no means we're entitled to none of this, and the government have been incredibly generous with what they've put out so far.
Yeah, no, I think it's true, and generally speaking, the consensus, even from people who were very torn or on completely the other side of the fence during the election, the consensus seems to be that Rishi's doing a good job, and obviously if he can follow through with this, with the support packages he's announced, it will help a lot of people. But like you say, you need to keep in mind that we're going to have to pay for this at some point. So I guess it's take what you need, but no more.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you really need the money, go ahead and take it. But taking it for the sake of it, it's just going to make everybody pay more tax in the years to come.
Yeah, okay. I've got a question from Alex here, who has said, a lot of this stuff doesn't apply to him, but thinking about longer term, is there anything he should be doing to change his business so that should something like, and geez, touch wood, something like this doesn't happen again in our lifetime, but things like paying himself more of a salary, I guess, one thing that we've been doing for a while is running a separate business as a letting agency, which predominantly just manages our own portfolio, but that is viewed as a separate business entity. So some of our property profits are channeled into a different business. So that's sort of viewed by HMRC in a slightly different way. Is there anything that, future planning property investors and landlords should be thinking about in the way they structure their business to prevent this situation again?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably be quite contrarian and say no, simply because something like this is a very unique circumstance. All the previous planning done wouldn't have ever really kind of prepared for this, prepared for the support that's offered. So people saying, okay, yeah, great, I should have taken a higher salary just to get, so if I can claim 80% of a higher salary, so I get more through the job retention scheme. But no one knew that it was going to be 80% of this. So to start taking a higher salary just because this might happen again in 10 years' time, you'll just be almost foolish, really.
Yeah.
Plan what you can, but if you've got a business model that works in a time when we're not in global lockdown, then you've got a business model that works for 99.9% of the time, and that's a good business model. So I'll just stick to that, and maybe let this be a lesson that always keep a good pot of cash aside for things like this that are going to happen every couple of kind of slowdowns. They're going to happen every 10, 20 years. So just make sure that you're prepared for the next one. That's what I'll do. I wouldn't necessarily change your approach or take a higher salary. It's just unfortunate that that's how they based it on for this very specific circumstance. Yeah.
Do you see, and obviously I'm not going to ask about specific details of your clients, but generally speaking, do you see most people, and perhaps it's a generational thing, but are most people spending what they earn? Are most people getting money into their account and then viewing that as their disposable income rather than putting money aside? Or do more people fall on the sort of conservative side and they are every month putting away 20, 25, 30% for the sort of rainy day fund and tax bills and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. Well, we've got quite a diverse mix of clients, and really some that fall into both of those categories. So you have people that might be just started out in their business in the past year or two, and have been putting all the money back into the business and actually buying more properties, taking on more deals to reinvest that. And they've been, you didn't expect for a slowdown or this to happen. So now they've kind of come a bit stuck, and there's a massive shortage of cash. But then you especially with, I suppose it is quite a generational thing. So some of our older and more mature clients, maybe it's because they've been through this and have learned the hard way the first time around. They've got pots of cash sitting there, and they are more prepared for this kind of thing. They're less aggressive with their growth. They're not taking all the money out. They are leaving a lot of it in there. So yeah, I suppose in part it could be a generational thing. But we do see a good chunk of people that are taking all of their money out from their company, and now something like this happens, they are completely stuck and they're unable to pay their bills.
Yeah, it's a tough situation to be in, and if anything, if there is a silver lining, maybe it does make more people think about that, living within their means. And I'm not preaching this by any stretch, but it is something to think about for the future. I'm really sorry, Joshua. There's loads of sort of crystal ball type questions which I'm not expecting you to know the answers to, but it is interesting to get your view on them. We've had another one about Section 24. Do you think that there is going to be any relaxation of that, or any, are landlords going to get any breaks going forwards because of the sort of hammering that the economy is taking?
From the way I see it, it's looking very unlikely that anything on that is going to change. So from next year, you get the full impacts. So it's really the first year where the government's going to receive all this extra tax revenue coming through. So they're going to be quite happy with that. And then I can't really see any way that they're going to look to change it. It's only just started to kick in fully. So they've just started to enjoy the rewards from it. So I don't see any reason why they now would be plan on that.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So not something we can look forward to, unfortunately. Sarah's just said absolutely agree regarding having cash reserves. Sarah's definitely one of the more sensible people I know, so it doesn't surprise me that she's on board with you in that regard. We've had a question here from Kelvin as well. What support is available to landlords who have unencumbered properties and whose tenants' income has been affected? So I guess there's no mortgage deferment, but they still feel an impact on their income, and they will have their own bills and responsibilities. Yeah. Even if they don't have the mortgage, they will be dependent on that for cost of living and so on. But their tenants' income has been affected. What sort of support can they get?
Yeah, so from the government, there really is no support available from them, aside from the kind of almost the benefit and support system. So you could look to claim universal credits and things like that where they've been impacted by this. But universal credits, they can be quite complicated to apply for. Plus, they don't really apply to a lot of people. So in terms of support that's available, they're one of those categories that have been completely forgotten about. So they tried to address it with obviously the mortgage holidays, but then unencumbered landlords. The only real option there would be to borrow some money to cover the short-term shortage. Other than that, universal credits, but that's not going to be very much at all. Yeah.
Okay. So not great news there. It does feel like there is a bit of a gap here. Do you think that these sort of the petitions, I mean, is there much chance of them having an impact? Do you think that there is enough support for private landlords? I mean, we've seen it before. We had them for Section 24. We've had them for a whole bunch of stuff in the past, and it just never really seems to get the momentum because we are such a small group proportionately. Do you think there is any chance of additional measures being announced?
To be honest, it's quite unlikely at this stage. I think we're kind of far enough through it now, whereby by the time they've even reached Downing Street, got enough momentum, we'll almost be out of this the other side. Mm-hmm. So I can't personally see any of the measures being introduced, especially for landlords. The way to get a petition to Downing Street apparently is has to look good on the cover of the Sun. And then a petition saying, let's provide some financial support to landlords. That's not going to get enough momentum, and it certainly wouldn't be. It wouldn't have enough popularity generally for them to basically take notice of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's Yeah, an interesting way of looking at it. What I would say to Kelvin, I suppose, what the approach that we have been taking is, and we had a chat with John Paul on Friday, Kelvin. If you missed that, it might be worth going back and revisiting, because we looked in a bit of detail about how we can continue to collect rents. And the sort of general view was be as empathetic and compassionate as we can be. Obviously, it's a difficult situation for them. If their income has been affected, they're going to have a lot going on. And if we can support them in any way, it's our, the whole sort of, if we all show each other as much goodwill as possible, we will get through this stronger collectively. But equally, don't become the easy route to not pay. I think about it as sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So on the bottom level, you've got your sort of core survival. You've got food and water. You've got shelter. You've got heat and power. And shelter. The house that you provide them should be one of their top priorities in terms of paying. Their non-essentials should be getting culled before they are considering not paying their rent. If they've got car leases, if they've got Netflix subscriptions, expensive Sky TV packages, there is a lot that they should be doing before they're coming to you. Now, in a lot of cases, they won't be, because landlords are seen as the easy touch. We don't have the sort of credit departments who are constantly making phone calls and sending threatening letters and following the right proceedings to get money back. We are often seen as the easy touch. So be empathetic, be compassionate, but also continue to make them aware that they have an obligation to pay their rent. It's not free money. If they don't pay it now, they'll have to pay it in the future. If they've been furloughed, they should be getting 80% of their salary at some point in the near future, hopefully. And Josh, I don't know if you've got any. How quickly are companies going to start getting some of that from the government if they get this sort of job retention scheme?
Yeah, so job retention scheme, we're looking at May. That'll start coming through to the companies, but the vast majority of companies should still be paying all of their employees as usual. So the onus should be on the company to basically find the cash.
Okay.
So most employees should still be getting paid.
So at the end of this month, most of them should still be getting their normal salary dropping into their bank account. Okay.
Just to touch on
Sure.
that, I'd probably suggest that one of the things you can do to your tenants is point them towards the government website to show them what help is available. Mm-hmm. Because they might not know that they're covered by the job retention scheme or all these kind of self-employment support scheme if they're a self-employed tenant. So direct them towards the Gov website and say this help could be available to you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to come on to. Give them support to find out how they can ensure that they continue to get paid as much as possible. If they're getting 80% of their salary, so in theory they should be getting 100% for March. If it drops down to 80% in April and May, it's not so much. I don't believe it should be the case that they're only paying 80% of their rent. I think that they should be looking to reduce their other outgoings sufficiently so that they can still, because trust me, they'll still be paying their gas and electricity bill. They'll still be paying, all of the other essentials. They'll still be paying the supermarket. They're not going to walk into Tesco and say, "Can I pay 80% of my food bill?" So they need to make cuts in their lifestyle and in their expenses. And in most cases, any employees who are retained should have sufficient income to pay their rent. If they don't, then look at universal credit. Encourage them to look at that. Look at the other schemes that the government have announced to help people maintain their income, and support them as much as you can. But just keep it front of mind for them that if they don't pay it now, they will have to pay it at some point in the future. It maybe sounds cold cut, but they will be making decisions to choose things that benefit them more. So it's got to, if they want goodwill from you, they need to be showing goodwill as well. Question here from Tom. I appreciate you can't see these, Joshua. I'll just read it out now. So Tom has said, would you imagine, for example, if you take the government self-employed grant up to $2,500 a month, will that have any impact on your personal credit rating going forwards? And I've seen questions about this from mortgage deferment, all sorts of different schemes. Are the government going to do anything to ensure that banks don't look at us as a high risk in the future because we've had to take any of these support packages?
Yeah, absolutely. So the self-employment support, the grants from that, they shouldn't have any impact at all on your credit rating. It shouldn't come into it. It will just likely be shown on your tax return for next year, extra income, so the grant is taxable. But I can't see have any bearing at all on your credit history or any ability to raise finance. Same with all the other schemes. The mortgage and the rent breaks, they might have an impact. That's something to speak with your broker about. But the rest of them shouldn't touch you whatsoever.
Okay, yeah, this is something we covered last Thursday with Lisa, again, in another call specifically on sort of mortgage finance. She did have some concerns about the sort of mortgage deferment in the way that it shows up on your file. Different banks might handle it in different ways. And whilst in theory it shouldn't really have a knock-on impact, the visibility that mortgage brokers get to why things are rejected, it's basically black or white. It's been approved or it's been rejected. They don't often get the detail. And whilst the banks could say, oh yeah, it's not going to have an impact on you, if a couple of years from now you all of a sudden get rejected for a mortgage application, it might be at the back of your mind, oh, I wonder if it was due to that, which is why she said, and I think you echoed this earlier, Joshua, Lisa said, mortgage deferment should really be a last resort. Obviously, take it if you need it, but they could have a bit of a longer term knock on you. So if you can do anything else, if you can take advantage of some of the other grants and loans available, then that might be the first port of call before you go and speak to your mortgage company. I guess the sort of the loans, the sort of government-backed loans, the business interruption loan scheme, that probably will have an impact on your credit score, right? That's going to show as a loan on your credit file, most likely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just a new form of credit, essentially. As if you were to walk into your bank now and get a loan out, it's going to have that same impact. So it would show on your credit rating, unless it's repaid as well, it will show as outstanding. So that will have an impact.
Okay, so with all of these things then, you need to think about short-term survival, but then also going back to take what you need but no more. It's not just from a sort of selfless think about the economy and our children and grandchildren and paying it down the line. It's also from your own point of view. If you take more than you need, you might think, oh yeah, I'm flush, I've got loads of cash now, but at some point in the future, it could come back to haunt you when you're applying for something and they're saying, oh, well, you've got this 40 grand loan outstanding and, you've got a couple of unexplained payments on your mortgage. It could all have some impact longer term. So take what you need, but no more. I think that's sort of becoming a bit of a clear message track for me, at least. One other question that's come up quite a lot, Joshua, is just in terms of applying for these, and obviously the application process is different for all of them. So I'm not suggesting that we run through it all, but there's a website, I think, is it businesssupport.gov.uk, that goes into the detail of these, which is definitely worth checking out. So I'll put that in the comments of this if you're interested, and that will just sort of take you through each of them, what you're eligible for, how you claim it. But I guess there's a couple of different approaches, right? So the mortgage deferment, you've got to contact your bank directly and have that discussion with them, right? And I guess that would be the same for any sort of credit obligations that you feel like you can't maintain. You need to speak to your bank as soon as possible. The grants, a lot of them, it's a case of government or local authority will get in touch with you if you're eligible. So small business rates, even I think the self-employment, they're going to reach out to you if you qualify for these grants. So there's nothing you need to do to apply for them. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've not heard from your local authority, probably by next month, and you feel you're eligible, then reach out, get in contact with them, look at the website to see if they've got any information about it. With the self-employment support scheme, HMRC are likely going to contact people that are eligible. But again, if you're eligible and you're not being contacted by May or June time, then I'd reach out to HMRC and inform them that you're eligible and you need to take advantage of this. The job retention scheme, that's something that is going to be made available to employers by April, and that will be something that they have to apply for. Okay.
And I guess the other thing that you're going to need to apply for, if you choose to, is the business interruption loans. That's something that you need to proactively go and seek. Yeah. Okay, fine. Good stuff. Okay, well, I think that, excuse me, I almost got to the end of that without coughing, but pip to the post. I think that covers everything that I wanted to run through. Is there anything else on your mind, on your notes, that I should have asked that I haven't done? Anything else that people are asking about? that would be useful to know, or do you think we've covered most of the major points there?
Yeah, to be honest, I think we've covered absolutely the vast majority of stuff that people need to know about this. The key message really would just be to get prepared and make sure that you're in the best possible position to come out of this stronger and more resilient.
Perfect. Okay. So I guess the only thing that I'm going to ask you then is just in terms of contact details for yourself, business details, all that sort of stuff. If people want to get in touch with you, if people are looking for support short term or longer term with, their property and sort of tax affairs, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on all the different platforms. We're on YouTube as well. Type in Joshua Tharby, got a YouTube channel. The second best place would probably be the Property Tax Secrets Facebook group. So if you type Property Tax Secrets into Facebook, that'll bring you to our group. We've got over 5,000 members now. That's the best place where I put content, answer people's questions. Aside from that, you can give me a email, joshua@jsmpartners.co.uk. or a message on Facebook. Yeah, I'm everywhere. Instagram as well, Joshua Tharby.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear. Just one final request from me, if this has been useful for you guys, just to give it a like so that we can share the message with as many people as possible. We'll be back multiple times over the course of the next couple of weeks with different experts covering different topics. So join us for any of them that you want, whether you can join us live and get your questions answered or just watch the replay. Hopefully it's valuable to you. So that's it for today, Joshua. Just a huge thanks to you for taking the time to be here and to answer these questions. And I'm sure we'll get the chance to speak again soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, cheers. See you later. Okay, guys, that's us done for today. Hopefully that was useful for you. Not as much sort of good news and optimism necessarily for property investors and landlords. It does feel like we are getting a bit of a raw deal here, but ultimately, as we said, the desire is to keep the economy going by ensuring that people continue to get paid as much as possible. And as long as that happens, then in theory, most of our tenants should be able to continue to pay their rent, which is the main sort of message to take away from this. Support your tenants, as we discussed on Friday, empathy, compassion, but not be an easy touch. Do what you can to help them continue to receive their income or find income from elsewhere. Universal credit. Lots of employers are employing, lots of the supermarket chains and big distribution centers are looking for employees at the moment. So there is some work out there. There are options for people who have lost their jobs, and hopefully the majority of them are being furloughed and getting at least 80% of their salary. So I'm hoping that rents aren't as big an issue as we initially thought it might be, although I'm sure you'll still get requests from tenants from time to time. So just talk it through with them, understand their own situation, and see what you can do to help them. But yeah, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any suggestions on what you want us to cover later in the week, let me know. We're also going to be live tomorrow at 10 a.m. Just me, basically. Just informal Q&A. I will be answering any questions you've got about anything related to property investment. A casual chat, a bit of fun. But yeah, if you've got anything that's on your mind about COVID-19 scenario or anything beyond that, just drop in. We'll be live from 10 a.m. here on YouTube. Might even go live on Instagram as well, given it's just me. I think we can probably do that. It'd be good to see you there. Good to get some questions, have a bit of a discussion. And thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Cheers, guys. Bye.